Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. You're listening to Airsick Hydra, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the longevity of Mechanicus. Now, this is a topic I thought was very well stimulated and encouraged by a discussion I had with someone regarding Mordheim recently. Mordheim is also a warband-based game. Obviously, it's Warhammer Fantasy. However, the game is able to take hundreds of hours from you without making you feel sick of playing it, sheerly for the pure joy of playing it. And this, I feel, is a game very useful to compare to Mechanicus in its current state, just to maybe describe some of my feelings towards Mechanicus and why, even though I think it's a fantastic game, it's not going to hold me for that long. Now, I do want to say, hands up in the air here, I do not rate a game's value or success on how many hours it can sponge from a player. I do not think that is a good metric to use to judge a game's value. Whether it be 10 hours or 50 hours, if you have immense fun playing it, I think as a player, you need to respect that. I think you can have an amazing 10-hour campaign and think, wow, that game is amazing, never play it again. I think a game could have 50 hours and be really dull. The fact is, I think the quality is more important than the quantity, because there's plenty of Skinner box games out there that you can spend 1,000 hours in that are all absolute crap. But, that being said, I think Mechanicus has the capacity to make you play for a long period of time without losing interest. However, currently it's missing, I think, a few elements to do that. Obviously, we touched on difficulty already. The game is not particularly well balanced past the mid stages. Once you've got yourself a heavy weapon and made a few skill choices, you can just smack about Necrons like they're nothing. It does get pretty easy, and hopefully when that changes, obviously that will help. Now, I do want to jump here on the bandwagon and say that, okay, despite the fact that we have multiple different difficulties available within the actual game mission system, so you can choose easy, medium, or hard missions, I really do think a overarching difficulty selector, even if it just increases every enemy's health by 30% and damage by 30%, would go a long way to create a situation where it's really worth talking about skills, damage, using the tools that we have in a way that allows us to succeed rather than fail. I think that this would put the game in a much better place strategically as well, because currently I'd love to make some actual guides and talk-throughs as to what I think is worth using in this game, but let's be honest, there's not a lot of point right now, because once you've got those few early game skills, it really doesn't matter. You're going to be ruffle stomping most stuff fairly easily. I'm perhaps generalizing a little bit here, but the game does get fairly easy fairly fast, so variable difficulty modes, even if it's just for the amount of damage we take, I think would be very helpful. There's perhaps an extra layer of difficulty that you can throw in, and this is something that Mordheim did really well, and that is that when someone dies, they're dead. And the Iron Man mode, I mean, you can have that separate to the difficulties. You could do an easy Iron Man mode or a hard Iron Man mode, or you could do an easy non-Iron Man mode. If you're wondering what I mean by Iron Man, I mean when one of your tech priests die, they stay dead. Or maybe you have to pay a very large sum to recruit another, or maybe a screen pops up and you can replace him by paying a certain amount. I don't exactly know what the best system would be for Mechanicus, but it's something that really added a level of edge to Mordheim. It's something that made you actually think, oh my god. Maybe even just an injury system. That was something Mordheim had as well. When you lost a character, they actually lost something for a certain amount of time. They could lose a leg, obviously it wouldn't grow back, but they may also just be injured for a certain amount of rounds. There's lots of different potential outcomes. Now, I'm not saying that Mechanicus needs to copy this at all, but I think the lack of punishment on death is something that does detract from the game's potential longevity. For example, we talk about the current punishment system, which is paying Blackstone for every health that you're missing by the end of the game. That is currently insufficient as a punishment system. It's a nice idea, but the problem is it just creates a overly focused healing meta, which I think is actually not as helpful for the game. I would rather have that cost system completely removed. The developers may disagree with me, you players may disagree with me, this is a personal choice, but I think that the downside of that system that we currently have, that if you're missing 5 health at the end of the mission, then you're going to lose 50 Blackstone, just focuses every character on having some form of healing implements, which really then detracts from the total build variety available. So instead of thinking, shall I go outright damage, outright shooty, it's always, well, I'll go outright damage and I'll save 2 of these slots for self-healing. Or I'll make sure someone has a bit. Because of the turn system, you always want to make sure everyone has a heal on them realistically. So I actually think that the current punishment system is not really a punishment system. It's just a mild annoyance if the turns don't work in your favour and someone takes some damage and you don't get the opportunity to heal them before the end of the mission. That's just a little bit annoying, but it never really feels punishing unless you completely wipe, in which case that's fairly expensive. But I think that there is, or maybe could be, just an outright separation. So for every bit of damage you take, you lose a little bit of Blackstone, perhaps, and then healing is not factored in. I don't know. I'd be very curious to see what the developers and other players think of this. By the way, down in the comments below, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one in particular. Healing meta, I think, is, not necessarily as helpful. The last thing I want to touch on, which I think is of some relevance as well, is that within a game like More Time and many games, you have dual currency systems. You have a lot of different currencies available and choices as to what to do. So obviously, within More Time, you had money and the Weirdstone, and you could convert the Weirdstone into money, but you also had to send it for shipments, la-di-da. I'm not saying Mechanicus needs that. But with money, you could either level up a character or purchase equipment. And by leveling up a character, I mean purchasing skills for them. You had a fair choice as to what to do, equipment or stats. And I think Mechanicus kind of has that, because you can either buy skills or armor, but you have to buy an armor every now and again to get the next skill, as far as I'm aware. Basically, I don't really feel like there's quite as much choice. When you've got Blackstone and you're playing through Mechanicus, you kind of know where to spend it. It's always fairly evident to the player. You've got a few choices as to which skill you would prefer, but it's always pretty evident. You don't need to spend too much time thinking about it. And I think that's maybe a system which I wouldn't necessarily change, but I do think it detracts a little bit from the potential replayability of the game. Taking from something like More Time, let's say, for example, I upgraded a guy in heavy armor to begin with, I bought him a new weapon, and I could only afford 1 skill. Next time I play through, I might think, right, okay, well, let's get him 2 skills and not get any armor for him instead. So straight away I've gone for a different play style. I don't really think that level of choice is quite there within Mechanicus, and part of that may be, and again, I think the skill system is quite well suited to the game currently, but the skills are fairly soupy. A lot of them give some benefits, but okay, maybe they're actually not soupy, they're just fairly apparent as to which one you should pick. If you want to go for a melee, there's kind of the melee tree. If you want to go for range, there's the range tree. And there's not a lot of mix and matching from different areas to make weird janky combinations. There's lots of little bits of utility to pick to create an overall character. And I think because of the lack of, let's say, cross-interaction between skills, again, I'm not saying they should change it. I'm just saying that this, I think, is a bit of a side effect from it. I think that is maybe another thing that detracts slightly from the longevity, but I would say I've had more fun in Mechanicus for a short period of time than I did in More Time if you took any given chunk. I'm just saying that I think Mechanicus could be a game with a few changes, an Iron Man mode, difficulty tweaks, maybe a couple of other bits, maybe a little look into that death mechanic with the Blackstone. I think a few little changes, and this game could be something where you could spend 100 hours on, but let's see what the developers are cooking up over the next few weeks. And guys, yet again, I'd love to see your comments down below. Take care. Have a great day.